Okay. Still spinning.
I think it's working.
It's still spinning.
It says it's recording on mine.
Oh, is it? Okay. Okay. Okay.
Rock
now
roll.
I see the record button. Yes. So good evening, everyone. So today's Wednesday night, and it's Angular APAC meetup. And today we have the always fabulous Kai Röder to join us. And if you don't know Kai, he's the maintainer of Storybook open source library, and he's also the host of Storybook channel. And tonight, I mean my evening, he will have a Storybook office hour, and I know I will attend because I want to learn more about it. And my mentor and I are going to use it to build a small app on Angular. And then tomorrow, Ben, Lash, Tracy Lee, and Sonda will come to Angular Nation to have a tour like the rock star that they are. So thank you, Bonnie.
It's not Ben Lesh. It's Mark Thompson, Tracy Lee. And
oh, sorry. Oh, because your photo.
No, it was my fault because I put Ben in the picture. But
yeah, sorry.
I was just using an old picture.
Okay, so thank you, Bonnie and Jeff, for arranging this event, because it's so hard to to access them, and because they are here, so we can bug him and ask them a lot of questions on Angular and other technologies. And then Bonnie will be very busy again because she has a architecture course and DOM course open for enrollment, and I encourage everyone to take the course, because I've become a better developer because of her courses. And then job fair. So do you want to talk about the job fair? And Bonnie, do you want to talk about
it? I've had some. Well, we had a job fair back in April, and we didn't know what we were doing. We just, were trying new stuff out, community initiatives and that kind of thing. And we had a job fair, and it went really well. And so we had a couple of people that had come in and they took the architect course. We had a couple of scholarships, and then they went into the job fair, and now they have amazing jobs. And it's just been really exciting to see. And so we've seen a lot of demand for that. So obviously we're going to do it again. But I actually planned it right after the architect course is done. Because as you know, if you've taken the architect course, it's very good for your confidence to get in there and really feel like you know what you're doing. So then you come out of the architect course and you're ready to rock and roll. And also the other thing we did that was really fun is the last time, it was actually Lamise's idea, and I love Lamise, and we did a pre-job fair workshop where we had like the job fair without the employers, and everybody got to practice, and it was really cool. So yeah, so we're gonna do anyway. It's gonna be fun. So yeah, we got a lot of cool stuff coming up, including today. It's like all Kai all day. I'm so excited about this.
Yeah. But today's topic is not about Storybook. It's actually about schematic. So if you don't know schematic, you can take a free course on Angular Nation. There's an introduction to schematic course by the other fabulous, like the always fabulous Natalia. So
yeah,
miss her a lot. I hope she comes.
I cannot believe that course is. I saw the course and I was like, "Are you sure you want to give this away for free?" And she said, "Yeah." And I was like, "Okay." It's amazing. It's a really good course, and it's free, and I can't believe it's free. But it's free.
Yeah, I mean, the course is great, schematic is great, but it has a lot of steps. So I'm very excited if Kai can simplify like the steps to create a schematic. So the floor is yours, Kai.
Thank you. So let me share my screen now and start my presentation. So I assume you can see my screen now, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I was already introduced, but let's just for the role, let me start over this again. My name is Kai, and I work for a company called AAB. They do software in the logistic and global trade management, and we are using Angular for since Angular 2, I think, for most of our front ends. And I'm maintaining a monorepository library since Angular 4, and that's how I came to schematics and all the stuff, and needed to learn all those things, because as a maintainer, you have some sort of responsibility for your consumers, and schematics help you with that. And I'm also a Storybook maintainer for Storybook Angular. As mentioned before, we have Storybook office hours later this day in 2.5 hours, I think, or 2 hours now. Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter or see discussions on GitHub with those handles. And let's start. I will present you a little package I wrote 1 or 2 months ago. It's called ngx-ci-toolkit, and it sounds like a slogan: develop Angular schematics with ease. It sounds good, but it's still pretty much in development, and you can do a lot of things, but it's not free of bugs and not production ready, I think. But let's see that later. So we first dive into the fundamentals of schematics. So I will show you a couple of common schematics you might already know from your day-to-day job. And then I jump over to the actual file structure that you need in order to develop with schematics, as well as explain a couple of use cases you might have and don't know about, why you should use schematics for your app or your library. Then I go over to creating your own schematics. I will show you existing solutions as well as explain the situation with schematics in libraries. That's something, as said, I grew in with schematics. And finally, I will show you a live demonstration of the package and the problems I try to solve. And we have plenty of room for questions, I think. So let's start with the fundamentals. Most of you might know, some might not. If you call ng-generate component, you basically executing a schematic. What you do is you call the component schematic, and user details is an argument, and the flag at the end, inline template, is an argument as well. That's a pretty common use case for your day-to-day job. But how does it look like if you call schematics from a third-party library? That looks kind of the same, but the middle part is different here. So you again call ng-generate, and then you have the package name. You might know it from Angular Material, for example. And then you have the name of the schematic. The difference is that at the top, those are the default schematics Angular ships, and the bottom ones are the way how you access third-party schematics. But I will go into those details later. So common schematics you might know. I already showed you ng-generate, and in my opinion, they're pretty great for speeding up your development. So when you use them the first time, you learn how something works, and if you use them in the future, you no longer have to copy paste them from any documentation. And I really feel, and when I need to develop in places that don't have a CLI, I always think, oh, okay, I have to again visit the docs and copy paste stuff, and I don't want to do it because I'm really got lazy due to Angular CLI. And it also ships best practices. So if you generate something like a module in Angular and add flags for, hey, give me add a route as well, Angular will automatically add all the code snippets it needs, and in the best way they think it should be applied to your project. And I like the idea, and you can transfer those ideas to your own schematics as well. We also have ng-add. For example, if you call ng-add Angular Material, you run through a little setup. It asks you which theme do you want to install, or all those kinds of things. And for me, it's less how to install. And this is actually great because having this feature makes me, if I have to choose between two libraries that do the same, let's say integrate Jest into my Angular application, one supports ng-add and the other one does not, I would most likely pick the one that automatically integrates it into my project. And I have more time to spend on the actual library and play around with it, and not don't have to install it first manually. And then we have ng-update. This one, from a library perspective, maintainer perspective, this is the most important one. You can painlessly update your projects. That's actually true from an app developer perspective as well, because since I think Angular 6 or 7 updates got so easy, you just call ng-update Angular CLI or Angular core, and everything just happens and you're up to date. And most of the time you have trouble with third-party dependencies, but not with Angular itself. And from a library perspective, you can set latest best defaults. Imagine what the Angular team does with Ivy. They added the use Ivy flag at one day, and then they removed it because they made it default, but you didn't have to do anything for that. You just could benefit from it. And it really gets rid of the fear of introducing breaking changes. So without ng-update, I always thought, can I really change this API now? It will cause a lot of trouble in the application that consume my library. But since ng-update, it's gotten pretty easy, like renaming things or moving things around and things like that are gotten quite easy. But I will dive into that later as well. So to sum up, good developer experience, in this case for schematics, makes happy developers. And I think having a good developer experience is always important for productivity and keeping up the motivation to solve the actual problems. Let's head over to the file structure of schematics. If you think about Angular material, in the package JSON of Angular material, there is a schematics field inside of it. So it points to a collection JSON file that contains all the schematics in your project, the name of the schematic, like Angular material, and then table. And this time I called it special table, but it can be anything. And you have a factory that points to a TypeScript file. In this case, it's the path to an index.ts file with a named exported function called generate_me. I will show you this later in the live demonstration. But this is the part where the Angular CLI, if you execute ng-generate and then a package name and a schematic name, it will look for this field schematics and check the collection file if this schematic exists. The same happens with ng-update, but it's kind of differently nested. You have an ng-update field and a path to a migrations JSON file. It contains all the migrations as well, with the difference that you can assign a version to it. But that's a detail I don't want to cover in this presentation. Maybe in the question part. So let's talk about use cases for schematics. One use case you could have to implement your schematics in an application or your library is something we, for example, did in our company. You could basically write a table generator, in this case, in our custom library with a schematic called table that creates a user list based on a specific model. And I don't want to go into detail here. Just imagine, by having the name user, which API you have to query to, and all the things you need to gather in order to solve this problem. But this is one use case you could solve with this. So this schematic could, for example, generate a service that fetches the data from the user endpoint, as well as generate a component and a table that renders this data, maybe with a basic default column ID or something like that. And from this point on, you took away the most of the part a developer that he should do manually, and he can then focus on other things instead of repeating himself. And then yesterday, I saw on Twitter, Jay asked, is there a way to convert all components to change detection on push, a migration schematic or something? And I answered in preparation to this meeting, to this meetup actually, as many mentioned here as well, I would write a schematic for that. ngmorph, this is a third-party library that ships a lot of schematic utilities. You will see it in a later example as well. ngmorph already ships utilities to edit decorators. It's not the complete solution, but maybe it helps. And I attached an image to this tweet, and it kind of looks like this. You don't have to understand it fully, but what it does in the end result is convert in every component you have, add a property to your decorator called change detection on push. I didn't implement the whole thing, but basically with ngmorph and a little bit of TypeScript, you can get all the decorators from your components and change the arguments of those decorators. This is not meant to demonstrate. You don't need to understand it. It's just should give you an idea of how simple it can be to solve those issues. So let's head over to creating our own schematics now. And I will present you the existing solutions I found. I'm not sure if I found everything, but those are the two I found. And the first one is the most obvious, I think. Angular itself already ships a command line interface for schematics. It's simply called Schematics, and you can create a new schematics project with schematics blank, and then you can pass in a name to it. But what I don't like is I previously showed you that you can create ng:generate, ng:update, ng:add schematics, and a lot of more. But this approach only gives you the ability to generate ng:generate schematics. But from a library author perspective, I also want update and add possibilities. And it also creates a new TypeScript project and does not integrate well into an existing project. I can actually show you the result of this. Maybe it's easier to grasp if I show you it in a short demonstration. So I'm in a project, a fresh Angular CLI project without NX. I have to mention that. I think most of you are NX users on Angular Nation. I've kind of found that out. And I've added a project UI using the CLI. You can generate a library like this, ng:generate library UI, and then you get this thing here. And if I now call schematics blank name my new schematics, it installs itself. It creates a lot of files, and which is pretty good, I think. And it's a valid solution if you just want to straight jump into this topic and play around with it. But what it does, it actually creates a separate project inside your project. So it has its own node modules. It has its own build system using a tsconfig, its own package.json with dependencies. And I'm not a fan of that because I want my schematics integrated into my existing project and not on top of it or as a separate project. But yeah, it does what it should do. It creates you a test file for your schematic and the schematic itself and the collection JSON I've shown you before. Let's clean that up. So, and head back to the presentation. The other solution I found is the novel workspace generator. This is something I just found today, this morning. And it also focuses, as far as I know, focuses on ng:generate schematics inside an NX repository. That's pretty cool, I think, because from an app developer perspective, I would assume that I need more ng:generate schematics than I would ng:update schematics or something like that. Because if every app and every library is in my existing project, in my repository, I can also use the IDE refactoring tooling for updating things. I think that's a pretty good approach for NX repositories. But what about library authors? I already asked, how can I use ng-add and ng-update schematics in my project? It's simply not possible using a CLI, and it is possible reading the documentation. Actually, it got way better than it was at the beginning, and following it step by step can help you integrating it into your library. But what the documentation basically says is set up, create your package.json entries yourself, like the migrations and ng-update entries. Create your collection and migration JSON yourself, and then during development and testing, create your schematic files yourself, and update your collection and migration JSON manually. And for the deployment part, you have to do it manually, copy files around. You first have you build your library, and then copy all the schematic build files into your dist folder and stuff like that. It's pretty complicated, and sometimes, for me at the beginning, it was kind of a motivation blocker. I didn't want to do all of those steps, and it felt overcomplicated, and I was kind of confused because Angular ships so many schematics to do things automatically that, and I was wondering why this is missing. But yeah, it's kind of build it yourself, feel a sense of accomplishment, but it's not efficient. And that's why I wrote ngx-ci-toolkit to make my own life easier and maybe the lives of some other people. The workflow of the CLI toolkit is for the setup. You can call ng-add ngx-ci-toolkit, and it will install all the necessary dependencies. You can initialize. Let me activate the laser pointer again. You can initialize schematics for specific projects. You can generate, update, and add schematics using the schematics that are shipped by the package itself, and they will automatically update your collection and migration JSON files. For the development, I have to admit that this is not yet implemented. So the outlook of this is, what I want is a zero config deployment for my schematics. So if I build my library, I want to build the schematics automatically and copy all the stuff without the need to configure anything in my library. I just don't want to. One possible way could be to add post build to my package.json, and every time my package builds, it would run a builder, shared UI, build schematics, and it does all the stuff, but it's, as said, not yet implemented. Okay, let's dive into the demonstration, and don't let the bugs bite you, because in my test run, I already found a couple of bugs, but it's still possible to run through the demonstration. Okay, I cleaned up my project. Nothing to commit, nice. So as mentioned, I'm in my project and I want schematic support. I run ng-add ngx-ci-toolkit. Make this one bigger. Yes, I want. And what it now does is not only install the package itself, but also install useful dependencies from the Angular dev kit, like architect core, schematics, and schematics Angular. Those are, for me, the dependencies where you can import lots of interfaces and utility functions you might need during the development of schematics. What you now can do is, you see we've only installed the dependencies. This is because I don't know in which project I want to enable schematic support. In this case, it's for libraries, but I can imagine to add the possibility to just just do the same to normal applications, but this is not yet possible and still work in progress. So that it after ng-add, it automatically creates all the schematic stuff for you. For now, you must run ng-generate ngx-ci-toolkit, and then the name of the schematic, in this case init for initialize. And you can pass in as an argument the project I want to enable schematic support. In this case, projects UI. Now you have in your UI directory a schematics folder with an empty collection JSON and an empty migration JSON file, as well as a package JSON that already points to those two files. So the setup is basically done now. And then let's say I want to, like every other schematic, I need to be in the right directory. Let's head over to the schematics directory and generate ngx-ci-toolkit. Let's add ng-add support. So those files that will enable my package to ship a setup file. As soon as someone calls ng-add my package, this script will run. And it asks me to, if my package is a dependency or a def dependency. For example, if you would install Angular material, it would be a dependency because you need it during the runtime. If you only need it during the development time, it's a def dependency. Let's make it a def dependency this time. Okay. In the schematics directory, this is one of the bugs. The schematic directory created a schematics directory. And inside of it, you have the ng-add directory with an existing ng-add function and a test script in order to test your schematics. And this is the test file for me is the most important one in the schematic development, because there are ways to locally execute your schematics to test if everything works. But this, for me, it's a lot of waste of time. I want to actually use test-driven development. I write the expected result, I write the current situation, and then I run my test and develop the schematic until my test is green. This is, for me personally, the best approach to write schematics. Okay, I got my ng-add files, and it also got added to the collection JSON file. You have ng-add here. This is actually kind of a magic keyword. As soon as Angular finds ng-add here, it knows, okay, this is the ng-add script. And let's add a generate schematic. It asks for a name, let's say fancy table. This creates a fancy table. And this is why I mentioned the thing about ng-add, because every other name is just a simple schematic. But ng-add is the actual ng-add schematic support. Yeah, now you might have expected it already. I got my schematic here again with a test file, my schematic itself with an interface for the arguments you pass in, and a new file you might not know, the schema.json file. This schema.json file is responsible for declaring all the inputs that my schematic is going to have. So kind of like name of the schematic would be name of the schematic. And I can ask if it's a user input, something I can write down in the terminal, or if it has a default value and stuff like that is managed in the schema.json file. And the last one is update schematic. Ask again for a name. Let's say rename foo to bar. And the description is rename foo to bar. And then an update version. That's I believe I mentioned this at the beginning. If you If you have ever updated Angular, then you might have noticed that for certain versions, certain migrations are executed. And this field is responsible for that. So as soon as my package hits version 11, this schematic gets executed. And I also can re-execute them, execute them again in a later point of time by adding the version. So basically, let me show it to you. So you can pass in a from, and in this case, for version 11, if I would pass in 11, the schematic would get executed again. But if I pass in 12, this schematic would be ignored. But that's basically it. It adds your update schematic, and you can find it here as well. And it contains an interface that should not exist because it does not make sense. This is another bug I forgot to fix. And a spec file. And I believe that's it. That's what my library does. So my intention was to solve those issues here. I didn't want to do all those things manually, especially you do the setup and the deployment just once, but the development and testing, you do it all over again for years now. I do it for years now, and it really wastes my time, and I want a generator for that. That's these are my final words, and we can head over to questions. Let's do this.
I just want to say that was awesome. I want your autograph.
Nice.
So does anyone have any question?
And by the way, can I just mention, because I think this was really, I mean, it's just the way that you broke it down and show everything is very, very simple, and I love it. But also, I just want to remind everybody, Kai knows all kinds of stuff. So you can also ask him general schematics questions, and
Yes,
even you can go crazy and ask him storybook questions if you want to. So it doesn't actually even just have to be questions about this, because he knows, his brain is just full of stuff, y'all.
I can maybe add one thing. I have mentioned it here. So in case you're about to integrate it in your project, and you think, hey, this looks nice, let's write schematics, but you don't know how to start, then I would definitely say use either ngmorph, or I think Navel has a schematics package as well that ships utility functions for the schematics development. Because if you don't use ngmorph, then you have to rely on the schematics API, which is pretty low level. So it's all about dealing with abstract syntax trees and with dealing with a recorder that kind of works like a Git begin, update, and commit thing, and it really makes easy things super hard, and you can get frustrated pretty fast. So by using, let's say, ngmorph, let's head over to the documentation. You get lots of things out of the box, like add a class to a file or add an interface to a file. Let's head over here. You have add a method to a class, or all those things. It makes it pretty easy to write schematics, and that's pretty important, because if it's not easy, you probably won't do it, and that's something I don't like. Easy things should be easy, and hard things can be hard, but you can try to make them easier as well.
I love it. I think if nobody has questions, can we just give a quick shout out to a couple of other things that are coming up. And I don't think it's actually been announced yet. Well, we actually have other things that are not announced yet, but also, well, we have Storybook obviously later on today, Storybook office hours. What was I going to say? Oh, I think we're going to do Angular Americas this Friday. That has not been announced yet. Oh, they do have questions for you now, Kai.
Yeah, they do.
Okay, you guys,
yeah,
you
sure.
don't have to ask them in the chat. You can just come off mute and ask them.
And if someone thinks, hey, I have a cool idea, or I want to join the discussion about the API, because everything, it's really just more of a proof of concept. Lots of things don't work, and I would be happy to have someone to chat about possible APIs or stuff like that. And don't just jump in and create an issue and start a discussion, or write me on Angular Nation here, or a direct message or something like that. Okay.
Hey, Kai.
Yeah, you have a question?
Yeah, so great session. And like I recently tried fiddling around with schematics, but the main thing that I found is, like you said, right? It's the APIs are quite low level, and there isn't much documentation when it comes to the APIs. So, is there any resources that you can share, which that you could get info regarding these APIs?
Yes, I was too fast closing my screen share. I can actually provide useful resources. I plan to add those to the document. Oh no, it's in the article actually. ngx-ci-toolkit dev.to. Can I find it like that? Yes. We post it here. I start this article by explaining the current situation and a couple of questions I had, and links that answered my questions, like the official documentation on Angular.io, as well as a pretty good article about schematics, the total guide to custom Angular schematics. It's wonderful. It's my go-to place if I had questions about schematics. It solves a lot of questions I had. So I can. I'm too fast. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. Here, I posted the link to my article, and I can also give you those two links, schematics overview, as well as this one.
So in the library that you shared, right, the ngx-ci-toolkit, so is that using ngmorph, or is it relying on the schematics APIs directly?
It's I can show you.
Yeah. Because I think we'll be able to get some inspiration from the library itself, right?
My use case was not pretty difficult, so I didn't use ngmorph. And for example, for my ng-add support, what I do is I have my ng-add function, and I have add dependencies. This is something that comes from Angular, I think. No, it does not. I have an add dependency function that figures out which current Angular version are you using, because I install additional Angular versions and Angular packages, and I want to have the same versions for them as well. But those are things that are easily done with JavaScript, and I didn't need any third-party tooling. And I also wanted to keep my dependencies as small as possible, so people don't need to rely on ngmorph if they don't use it. So basically, I only use the architect and schematics Angular, and I think I can even remove. Oh, can I remove RxJS? Maybe, probably in the future when I need observables. Maybe, I don't know. If you have any,
definitely we'll go through the library.
If you have any questions about implementations, we can also talk about this. We have 10 minutes left. Let me jump through it. I don't know my own code anymore. You have this cool concept of chain. Just stop me if you have a question. Just stop me. But I will talk about schematics all day long until we have 4 p.m. So in schematics, let me remove this. There's this concept of chaining different other things to one schematic. So you can actually split up your code base in smaller functions like create schematics configuration files, those collection and migration JSON files, or add schematic fields to package JSON. I try to separate them in different functions and to make things clear, because one thing I have no solution for is that schematic code often gets pretty messy. And sometimes it's okay because you solve a problem that only appears one time for, let's say, update schematics. If your update schematic works, why should it look like the nicest thing you ever wrote? Because it only gets executed once per application, and it doesn't need to shine or win any prize. But it should definitely be clean enough to get ideas from or copy parts out of it, or create utility functions and stuff like that. So yeah, that's my approach of writing schematics. Don't be too clean, but don't leave too much waste as well.
So probably write everything in one function and then later just split them into smaller functions once you're confident that your schematics works.
Yeah, something like that. Like I solved one problem, and I actually did this in my company's project. I solved one problem, and then for next 3 versions, it didn't appear again. And then I needed it again. This was the time I took the existing one and made a utility function out of it.
Great. Nice.
Did you show this library to the Angular team and ask for feedback?
Unfortunately, I missed the event with Alan on Angular Nation, where he was talking about the CLI. And I know that I got Sander mentioned me on Twitter and mentioned Alan as well. Like,
have
this
you
is
met Alan?
Yes, I have met him before, but we haven't talked about this, because I would love to have something like this in the native schematics API, because it seems so useful to me, and the lack of library support and all those things you have to do on your own as library author is really something I don't want to have, and I would love to integrate it in or at least give an inspiration for the native schematics API.
I'm going to tag him and let him know that we discussed him and see if we can get him to watch this and give us some feedback and see what he thinks. Because he's really cool. I like him. And obviously, Alan is going to come back to Angular Nation again, hopefully, because we love him and he's amazing. So it won't be the last time. But I'll tag him on Twitter and just let him know that his name came up and see what he says.
Sounds good. Okay.
Would you worry that this library will need major rewrite if like Angular schematic has breaking changes?
Yes, it might break things. I import a couple of things like update workspace and get workspace, sometimes from deep APIs, but in the last, I think 2 years or 3 years, they were breaking changes, but I always could easily solve them. So, I mean, they built so much with their own schematics until now. So I don't think they introduce major breaking changes that will change the whole schematic API. And if they might integrate all this stuff into their own, and I'm happy that my package actually broke up. And I can use something else. So but I'm not afraid of any breaking changes.
This was amazing, you guys. I have another call coming up. So I actually do have a hard stop at the top of the hour, but this was really super fun. Thank you so much, Kai. Hey, Connie, can we do the, did I tell you about the new tradition that I started that I love? Can we do this? At the end of the call, right before we say goodbye, we ask everybody to come off mute and thank our speaker. I love it. It's fun.
Thank you.
Come off mute.
Come off mute. Yeah, everybody come off mute and say hello.
Thank you, Kai.
And
Thank you,
our
Kai.
speaker.
Thank you,
Thank
Kai.
for the
Hello.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Kai.
You made this look easy.
I hope so. If not, then feel free to just ping me, give me a message.
Will do.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay.
How do I
Alright,
stop the
Bye,
recording?
everyone.
Put it over in activities under recording.
Oh, stop recording.
There you go.
Bye.
Bye.
Let me stop it first.